A guten Erev Shabbos on this lovely fall day. So the world is fixated on the passing of Queen Elizabeth II after 70 years of reign as the Queen of England and all its subsidiaries, etc., etc. And the Jewish community has had a very close relationship with her. She's knighted the chief rabbi of Great Britain and others, and she's always had a very strong relationship with the Jewish community. Although there's always been this challenge for us Jews that she never visited Israel, which is something we remember because she went to 43 countries, including Egypt and Jordan, but never visited Israel. But it's interesting because the moment the Queen passed away, everyone began, the first proclamation becomes, "Long live the King." And Prince Charles automatically becomes the king the moment the Queen passes away. But if you know, there's what we call, they let everyone know, London Bridge has fallen. That's the way the message was given by the Secretary of the Queen to the Prime Minister of England. And then there's a 10-day plan that goes into succession. And interestingly, although the king becomes king immediately and automatically, the coronation is not for another year or so. But immediately, in the first 4 or 5 days, he goes to Northern Ireland, he goes to Scotland, he goes to Belfast, he goes to Wales to meet and to greet and connect with the people who he's their king now. And ironically, by divine providence, this is the month of Elul. The month of Elul is called the month when the king is in the field. What does that mean? We all know Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, is the day of judgment, the day of prayer. We coronate God on Rosh Hashanah, and then we have Yom Kippur, which is the day of forgiveness. But the whole month of Elul, the rabbis tell us, God, the king, is in the field. He's more accessible, more approachable to the people. When the king is in the palace, it's hard to get to him. But when he's out in the field, it's easier to connect, to hear, to be with God. And that's the metaphor of the month of Elul. But unlike Prince Charles, lahavdil, not to compare, God needs us to coronate him right away. On Rosh Hashanah, we coronate God on the king because God needs us. A king is only a king when he has those who are under his jurisdiction. And that's the beauty of the way Judaism sees Rosh Hashanah and our connection with God. But you know, every single morning in our service, we say an interesting prayer. We ask God to return him closer to us, to be our king. And then afterwards, we ask God for forgiveness. And the question is, shouldn't we first ask for forgiveness and then coronate God as the king? It's the same thing with Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I tell you this every year. We should maybe first celebrate Yom Kippur, ask forgiveness, and then we coronate God. Rosh Hashanah, where you make God your king. Why do we first make God our king and then ask for forgiveness? And the answer is a very beautiful one. You see, we don't ask for forgiveness from God because we're scared of God, because we're worried of punishment. We ask forgiveness because we realize how great God is, and we want to have a relationship with Hashem because he's our king, because he's our father. Because as we say in Hebrew, Ein melech b'li am, there is no king without a nation. And therefore, what happens is first we coronate God as our king. First we say, God, you're our father, you're our king. We have that relationship with you. And because we have that relationship with you, because we love you so much, because we care for you, because we know how much you love us, then we ask God for forgiveness so we can have a better relationship. That's the story of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And that's the story with God, King of all kings, who is accessible to his people, but also needs our relationship to be our father, to be our king. You know, there's a humorous story that I said last year at Kol Nidre, on top of the hill at Lars Anderson, about Marvin Hare, who's the head of an organization that hunted Nazis and a remarkable man. And he says he was once invited to an event that the Queen was having at Buckingham Palace. And he said, listen, he would love to come, but as an observant Jew, he's kosher observant and he only eats kosher. And of course the queen's office let him know that's not a problem. There's enough ways they could get kosher in the palace. They'll have kosher for him. So sure enough, he shows up to this event. There's a few hundred people, dignitaries and special people from all over the world with the queen and her husband, Philip. And at the event, he sits down by his table, and there's of course this kosher cutlery wrapped with the supervision and this kosher food they bring in. Well, guess what? Right after the first course, the queen says, you know, I want everyone to get to know themselves, to get to know each other. Why don't you guys, each one, switch over to another table so you can meet more people, not sit with the same people? Well, now Rabbi Hair's in a dilemma. He would love to do what the queen says, but he's kosher, and for kosher, he needs kosher utensils. So what does he do? He picks up his forks, his knives, his cups, his plates, and he moves to the next table. And sure enough, there was another Jew there, and he says, look at this old-fashioned Jew. What's he doing here? He's so archaic. Does he have to schlep his dishes with him? What are you doing, he says. And the rabbi says, listen, I respect the queen and the king, but our tradition, our history is thousands of years old, even more than theirs, and these are the laws of kosher. He's schlepping with his dishes, and Philip sees him, the queen's husband, and he says, what are you doing, Rabbi? Don't worry, we have dishes for you at all the tables. You just have to move yourself, but you don't have to schlep your dishes. So the rabbi starts explaining him that he's kosher, and he says, oh, wait, he didn't realize that you have to have your dishes, and the rabbi explains him the way with kosher, the food is absorbed in the dishes, and he has to schlep his dishes. And Philip is just amazed, man. He's intrigued. He calls over the queen. He says, listen to this. The queen comes over, and they end up chatting for half an hour. For one shock, the queen and her husband, Philip, is chatting with Marvin Hair. They finished the conversation, and this guy was ridiculing Rabbi Hair for being so old-fashioned and schlepping his dishes, sees how much attention he gets. He goes over to Philip and he says, you know, I'm also Jewish. And without skipping a beat, he looks at him and he says, really? If you're Jewish, so why aren't you schlepping, why aren't you carrying your dishes with you? It's a humorous story and a true story, but it's a very powerful story. Sometimes we're embarrassed of who we are. But the world reminds us that there's nothing to be embarrassed of. We have to be proud. And I think one of the greatest things the Queen brought to Great Britain over the last 70 years, besides her consistency and her calmness and her strength, was her pride in her country and what she represented and who she was. She wasn't embarrassed of who she was. On the contrary, she carried it with pride. As the Queen, as an English person, and that's something we can learn as Jews as we get ready to coronate God as the King. And we say, long live the King of Kings, and may he be our King forever, and may he bless us all with a sweet and healthy New Year. Good Shabbos.